You know, I have to really give the Star Trek Picard writers credit. They are really getting every inch of use out of that 10 forward bar set. Hello interwebs, I hope you are all doing well because I am here to review the latest episode of Star Trek Picard, this time Season 3, Episode 5, Imposters. And I have to say, I am shocked that we are already at the midpoint of the season because this has just felt like a wild ride through and through. Now, to be honest, I got all these episodes in one big bundle, at least the first 6 episodes, so I've been watching them back to back, but like, I just went through these things. They felt so quick. So I'm assuming for all of you who have been watching it week to week probably feel the same as me, just on a little more elongated scale, but this has just been so much fun, and this episode is absolutely no different. I will stay spoiler free for the first minute or so, but I love this episode for one surprise in particular, that as soon as I saw what it was, I was like, oh my god, they're doing this. Like, there's been so many of those moments this season so far, but this one in particular, I was like, oh, I needed this, and it resolves something that I've always wanted to see resolved from previous Star Trek series. There's one storyline that I've always wanted to like really see brought to a conclusion, and they do it really beautifully and amazingly here in a way that does not feel ancillary to what's going on in the story, but actually makes it feel pertinent to what's going on. It was just a great use of that particular story beat and making it feel like it fits the story being told here and actually adds tension to the story being told here in a really great way. I'll talk a little bit more about what I mean by that in spoilers. But beyond that, what I really loved this episode for was capturing the tone of a paranoia thriller, kind of in the vein of those like 1970s like political conspiracy movies, or Invasion of the Body Snatchers, or The Thing, or even the episodes of Star Trek Deep Space Nine Homefront. Like, this episode just has that, like, you can trust nobody. It's really scary and oppressive because everyone around you could be on your side or not, and you don't really know who to trust. Like, this really captured that energy and vibe, and I loved the dark, ominous tone that just reverberated through this entire episode, and it was just so much fun and so creepy and oppressive. I loved it. Like, oh, nailing the paranoia thriller aspect of it. But with that being said, I have to get into spoilers. So if you have not seen the episode yet, get off here because I'm going to say spoilers in 3, 2, 1. Holy shit, we got Michelle Forbes back as Ro Laren. Hot freaking damn. Like, I knew they were going to bring people back. We've already seen some stuff in the trailers of things and people that are coming back, but they managed to keep Michelle Forbes hidden. And oh my god, the fact that we got Ro Laren, she is a character that I've wanted to see come back into Star Trek so much because her ending just naturally called for a follow-up from the Next Generation episode Preemptive Strike, the penultimate episode of the Next Generation. You always wanted her to come back Beta in Deep Space Nine or one of the Next Generation movies, and she never did, and I was really worried we'd never get to see her. And the fact that she did come back, mwah, oh, one of my favorite characters, gets a conclusion that feels satisfying. It's so great. We'll get to it, and I love that it feels relevant to what's going on here. Let's actually talk about it. We'll go through the episode beat by beat. We start off the episode with Titan at relief. Everyone seems to like be taking a breath, like we got away from the strike, we'll be fine now. And then we have this sort of like flash, like dream that Jack is having, where he's imagining like violence and wanting to kill the Starfleet crew, and he's hearing these voices like "come home," this like mysterious voice going on. So I'm really curious what's going on with that, especially with the Red Vine stuff. Like, who's calling to him? Why does he feel violence and anger towards Starfleet in particular? Is it his own anger or something that's influencing him? Like, really curious, and that goes on throughout this whole episode, that he just feels this like anger towards Starfleet for some reason. But then we have Riker, Picard, Shaw, and Seven meeting about the Changeling, being like, oh, okay, we beat the Changeling, but why was it here? Is this a one-off event? Sort of worrying about it. But I love that Shaw's just like, I'm glad I'm kind of done with this event, and, you know, Seven, I reinstate you, and I'll let you all, like, get your bullshit stories together, but I'm out because I just want to be done with this thing. I love Shaw. He's my favorite asshole. He is my favorite asshole. He's just so great in every freaking scene that he's in. I just adore the man so much. I do like, though, that Picard says he will take responsibility for everything, that this is like this, he'll sort of shoulder the burden for everybody and take it upon himself. Thought that felt very Picard, but then Beverly asked for permission to look into the Changeling body, and while she goes and does that, Jack and Picard kind of have a moment, and Jack says, I don't want to be in Starfleet. And it kind of goes to Jack's feeling of not wanting to be connected to anything, wants to be a loner, but also his fear of what's happening to him right now. So I like that I like that this thing that's happening to him is not just something completely separate from his own feelings, but it's compounding his own feelings about being a loner and feeling like he can't get help from anybody. So I thought, I liked that it just was compounding a feeling that we've already seen in his character, not something brand new to his character outside of it. So I liked that beat. It kind of fits with his feeling of not being able to join Starfleet or seeing Starfleet as a family that was kind of instilled in him by his meeting with Picard that we saw in the flashback of last episode. It kind of really connects all those dots. Then, and I'll kind of deal with this whole storyline just in its totality because it kind of all connects together, is we have Worf and Raffi back investigating what was going on with Sneed, our favorite Ferengi Sneed. And I like Worf sort of talking again to Raffi about like she needs to calm herself. She needs to be able to hone her aggression, hone her anger in a way that's much more directed instead of it just being like lashing out at everybody or sort of doing it chaotically. And that's a great lesson to learn from Worf. And Worf doing meditation, which Worf did some meditation. He did some like Klingon stuff, I recall, but he was a much more hot-headed character. And I like the fact that he is passing on how to deal with being hot-headed to Raffi, and I think that works really well. And then we learn that Worf has a handler of sorts, but that his handler is sort of having their hands tied behind their back. And I was wondering, like, well, who could his handler be? Is it someone that we know? And we learned who it is in just a little bit. But I really liked the reveal of that. But then they go after this Vulcan crime lord. And the idea of a Vulcan crime lord who, like logics himself into doing crime is such a cool idea. And when they do finally confront him, he is a fun character. I will say, I know there's probably not time, and this show just needs to go and get the plot beats, and so they're doing what they can with the time that they're allotted. But I really almost wish we had gotten to know more about this Vulcan crime lord, Kryn, because just the idea of a Vulcan crime lord is so fun as a concept, and we don't really get to see a lot of his ideology in these scenes. The one piece that we do get from him is he says, utopia requires crime, and therefore organized crime is logical. And I'm like, does a utopia require crime? I could buy that as like someone twistedly logics that as a concept that utopia requires it for X, Y, and Z, but we don't really get a deep dive into that, and so it just comes off a little bit superfluous. In maybe a Next Generation episode, we would have gotten the whole episode about this guy, and I would have loved to see that. Here, he's just sort of an interesting curio, I guess, when I would have rathered see a whole thing just going into this guy's ideology. So, fun beat with this character, but I'm not as deep as I would have liked him. But he is fun, and I do love that it's used for Worf and Raffi to have this discussion about like how Raffi can sort of learn to understand aggression, because the Vulcan clearly has hatred towards Klingons. It's very subtle, but it's there, and that's what they're able to use against him by him forcing them to fight each other. And I never bought that Worf was actually dead when Raffi stabbed him, because I'm like, Klingons have redundant organs. Come on, I did a whole video on that. I know what he's got two of, if you know what I mean. And so I knew Worf was going to be fine. So I figured that those were going to be all the beats, but it kind of worked for Raffi's arc. So this whole bit with Raffi and Worf, I liked, but it didn't knock it out of the park for me. I think there were elements of it that I think could have gone further, but, you know, we only have so much time. So some things, sadly, don't get as explored as I wish they could be. Such as Star Trek. That's not unique to any Star Trek show. There's so many unexplored ideas in many Star Trek things. I guess I'd rather things be interesting and left not fully explored than not being interesting at all. Also, it's worth pointing out that Raffi and Worf use a mobile emitter to try to trick the Vulcan crime lord, which is surprising to me considering that we learned in Star Trek Voyager that the mobile emitter is a 27th or 28th century technology. So I guess Starfleet has like reverse engineered the mobile emitter from future tech is the only way that I can explain that. Though I remember in Voyager it being that they couldn't do that. So I guess this has changed the future somehow, and no one from the time cops of the 26th century have bothered to come back and get the mobile emitter, I guess. But then we have the crew on the Titan meeting with the Intrepid, and I love that Shaw is just sort of like needling, again, Riker and Picard's like kind of excited that they're going to be off his ship, and he's just like, yeah, maybe they'll blame you for the things you did in, I think he references Insurrection, Generations, and All Good Things, and Riker and Picard are just sort of like, those were the days. I thought that was just a fun little beat with them. But then we get to the part of the episode that I was so pumped about. Like I said, Roe freaking Laren here. This was such a great reveal. I was so shocked. I was literally bouncing up and down in my seat when I saw her, and she is perfect for this, because as we learned from Beverly, the changelings are now able to completely mimic humanoid life. They can pass the blood test, so it creates this really cool dynamic where Roe is a character who betrayed Picard, and he does not trust her because she had so directly betrayed his trust. But that is the one thing that the Changelings are willing to use against people. Because he doesn't trust her, he has to sort of work through that to be able to figure out if he knows her well enough in order to figure out if she is a Changeling or not, because he does learn that information. I thought it was just such a great dynamic that puts the arc that we want Picard and Roe to go on, which is them reconciling after the end of where we saw them off in the preemptive strike, where she did betray him and join the Maquis. It puts that wanting of that resolution at odds with what's happening in the episode. And this is what I was talking about when I said it feels relevant to the story being told. Like, Roe being in Starfleet makes sense to me. Her coming after Picard and being very distrustful of him makes sense to me, especially in this Changeling situation, but also her investigating the Changelings. It all makes sense. Like, it all feels natural. And yet, it's not only just natural in terms of the plot, but natural in terms of the themes. Because the fact that Picard is able to work through his sense of betrayal, his anger at Roe, through this storyline where that is the main thing, where you can't trust anybody. It feels like, in a weird paranoia thriller way, very Star Trek, like learning to overcome like trust issues in the darkest of times, but also just like creates great tension out of these storylines that we wanted to see resolved for about 30 years between these characters. So it's just, the use of Roe here, I thought, was actually really intelligent and just a great way to bring resolution to this character. Because we have such back and forth with them, with Picard even talking to Rikers, just like, this girl, screw her, like, she betrayed me. And I love that he sort of starts calling things out, like little details about her, about like her earring that she used to wear. It's like, is that a sign that she's actually a changeling? Because, you know, Roe wore the Bajoran earring on the wrong side of her head as a sign of like disrespect to the Bajoran religion, but also love for her family. And so it was just a complicated thing for her, and I really liked that. And so that the fact she's not wearing it is like an interesting sort of like, what's wrong with her? But then they go into the holodeck and making sure to get every inch out of that bar set that they have. The conversation between her and him was superb. Like, the idea that Picard mixed up his ideals of duty with personal betrayal. Like, he felt betrayed. When she betrayed Starfleet, he felt that he was betrayed and not Starfleet's ideals. When, for her, it was not betraying Picard, it was actually standing up for her own ideals in spite of them being at odds of Starfleet. And it wasn't her betraying him, but standing up for herself. And if Picard had seen her and been able to divorce that from himself at the time, he would have understood that, but he didn't. He saw it as a personal betrayal. And I loved Roe calling him out on that he had so tied his identity into Starfleet at that time that he couldn't sense the difference, and her just making that very clear. You confuse morality with duty.
Nothing happens to obstruct this mission. Sorry, I don't have that kind of money.
I thought that was just a great scene, that really calling out a character flaw with Picard from way back in this other season. It felt so emotional and raw, and I liked the fact that because they were able to have such a deep and meaningful conversation, that's how they knew to trust each other. And then we get all this information where Rose said Starfleet's been infiltrated at the highest level. So we have this really great paranoia, like 1970s conspiracy, anti-government, can't trust anyone sort of feel to them, like the Escape the Condor sort of thing. 3 Nights of the Condor, I should say, the Robert Redford film. Like, all that stuff is just so cool. And it sort of tied into her saying, like, well, it might be tied to this Frontier Day that we've been hearing about, where all the entire Starfleet fleet is going to be out to show the pomp and circumstance of the military. It's a little pro-military. It's fine. But anywho, so that's sort of creating a ticking clock that our characters have now on the board. So all really interesting stuff with all of that, and I loved it. Oh, and one thing that I meant to mention that I forgot when I was recording the review is that I like the fact that we learned that there's changelings throughout all of Starfleet and not just on the Titan, which fixes the thing that I was worried was going to be a plot hole, which was, why was there a changeling on the Titan in the first place, and how did the changeling know that Riker and Picard were going to steal it? And the answer is, it didn't. It just also happened to be on the Titan because there's changelings everywhere. So that also adds to the sense of paranoia, because the very fact there was a changeling on the ship at all was completely just coincidental to the plot, not there because of them. It makes the conspiracy theory feel much larger, it fixes the plot hole possibility that I had, and it adds to the tension of the just everything going on, because it just makes it feel like, oh, they are everywhere. So I really liked that beat there. I thought that that worked really well, that we learned this. It makes sense given the information that we have. But this all leads to Roe telling Picard that the Titan needs to go on the run. And Picard's going to Shaw and trying to convince him to do just that. But as they're leaving, Roe gets stopped by the two changelings that are on the shuttle, and they're going to basically blow up a shuttle and kill her. And initially I thought, like, well, why would they kill her? That seems like a weird choice that these changelings would do at the moment. But I liked the idea, as we later learn, is that her explosion was something that they could blame on the Titan, thereby they could take the Titan in and turn everyone against them, that they could try and grab it and then get Jack Crusher alive, because that's what the changelings ultimately want. They want Jack Crusher. So by sort of putting this blame on the Titan, that means they could probably maneuver themselves to be able to find and get Jack and have more time to investigate where Jack is on the ship. So I thought that was very smart, but this leads to a brilliant ending, I think, for Roe, where she sacrifices herself for Picard and for him to get away, and that feels like a great sort of resolution in turn for who she was, and she would do the right thing and sacrifice herself if need be, even her relationships. And I love that Picard says, I see her. I see you now. And that was just, I think, a really beautiful moment. While I am sad to see Roe go, and there's an element of me like, oh, Roe is sacrificing himself for the dude main character. There's a little bit of that in me, but I think it ultimately is just I think it's a great fitting end for her character. We got to see the storyline that we wanted to see her resolve around her relationship to Picard. But it's, I think, a really fitting end for her. And I love that Picard at the end says, I didn't even know what she meant to me. I thought that that was really great later on. So great ending. I love that Shaw ultimately does make the decision to go on the run. Again, I like that Shaw is an asshole. I find that fun, but he's not unreasonable. Like, you can convince him. It takes a little bit more time than probably should be typical, but he will make the right decision. So Shaw's a dick, but he's not an unreasonable one, and he does go on the run. So I thought that that was absolutely great. Again, love his character and his decisions here. But then we get this last beat where we see that Roe had given Picard her Bajoran earring, and on it was all this spycraft stuff of her investigation, and that she was Worf's handler. So now we have Worf and Raffi finally coming into the fold to meet back up with their main characters instead of being off doing their own thing for the last few episodes. So I really liked these tying together these plot threads. I loved Roe being here, but not my favorite thing, but something that I really also liked was at the end of the episode when the Changelings try to capture Jack. He kills them using his violence that he's sort of been instilled in him, but he does that thinking that they are Starfleet officers. So it did come out, even though he did not know that they were actually changelings. He was very lucky that they weren't. But I like that the fact that he tells Beverly what's going on with him. I always hate plots that resolve around characters not telling people something that they should tell them, especially when those characters trust each other. And all we know really about Jack is that he trusts Beverly. He would sacrifice everything for her. She's his mom. So of course he would trust her. And so I like the fact that he's not hiding it from her. He's not sort of keeping it down so the plot gets extended a little bit longer, but he actually does come out to her when she asks. That he struggled with it for a little bit for one episode, but they're not going to extend it any further, and that she's now in on the problem. So thought that was great, and I thought that was just, I was like, thank God you're avoiding that trope, because I've been very frustrated if he had lied. So that's everything that's went on with this episode. Another really great one, but most importantly, the return and conclusion to Ro Laren. While I am sad to see her go, and I would have loved to see more Ro Laren stories, I do think this is a fitting end for her and resolves the arc that we've always wanted to see her resolve with her relationship with Picard, going back to the Next Generation, but also feeling relevant to what's going on here and using that relevancy to heighten the drama in a really cool paranoia thriller way. So I love this episode. This was another really great fun one. So I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. What did you think of this episode? Beyond that, I hope you all, my friends, live long and prosper.